Hello YouTube and welcome back to another video. Today we're returning to Star Wars Armada to look at some ships that are not played and probably should not be played. At time of recording, which is October 19th, 2020, these ship cards are, you just won't see them being played in competitive games. They're suboptimal choices, and it needs to be clarified that it's these ship cards specifically. If you want to go out and purchase the Interdictor expansion pack, great, do it. The Interdictor Suppression Refit is an amazing support craft. The Imperial Star Destroyer expansion pack is another great choice. The Imperial 2 Star Destroyer is an amazing, just general purpose capital ship. These specific ship cards that you see here are one of the 2 ship cards you get in each expansion pack, and these ship cards are just suboptimal choices, either compared to the other ship card that was released in the expansion, or to other ships that are available to the faction they belong to. So, let's get into it and let's examine what makes these choices suboptimal. So starting off, we have the Rebels Assault Frigate Mark II-A. Yeah. So when you first get an expansion pack, you look at the ship cards, and probably the first comparison you make of one ship card to another ship card is to, well, the other ship card that came out in that expansion. So, what makes the Mark II-A inferior or superior to the Mark II-B? Well, if we're going off of alternate art cards, the Mark II-A definitely clinches it. The Mark II-B has not gotten an alternate art card, and the Mark II-A got one, and boy oh boy did it get one. This is from a few years ago, but it still looks amazing. And honestly, it's the only reason to ever run the Mark II-A at this point, because you get to show off this awesome looking alt art card. Alternate art cards aside though, the Mark II-A is just a strictly worse version of the Mark II-B in almost every regard. And you may think that's a weird thing to say, especially given the fact that, well, the Mark II-A's got more dice. It's got 2 blue flak and it's got an extra blue dice in the front and rear arcs. How can I say it's worse if it's got more DACA? Well, the squadron value. Squadron value of 3 versus squadron value of 2. Squadrons in Armada, for better or worse, are one of the strongest components, and being able to push more squadrons, or say put rapid launch bays with 3 squadrons of B-Wings in the Mark II-B, it's just better. And even if we're not looking at squadrons, how much is an extra blue dice in the front arc going to do? Especially when the Rebels have access to a commander like Admiral Akbar, who doesn't care about the front arc at all. So, is there a way to balance it? Yeah, quite simple. Make the Mark II-A 72 points like the Mark II-B. Maybe even 71 points if you can't, if you really don't want to have ships cost the exact same. But it's definitely not worth 81 points. It's not worth 9 points. 9 points is half a GR75. It's not worth it. But again, all hope is not lost. It just needs to come down in points, and suddenly you have a very usable Rebel medium ship. Next up, we have the GR75 Combat Retrofits. Yeah, unfortunately, this ship is kind of hard to salvage and balance for 2 reasons. One, the GR75 medium transports is just so points efficient. 20 points gets you an activation flotilla and a comms net. You really cannot argue with that. It's just so cheap, so points efficient. The GR75 Combat Retrofit, well, it's got some blue dice that it can throw around, but how much is 1 blue dice really going to affect the game? Especially when GR75s have rather large side arcs, and you have no dice in your side arcs. You only have blue dice in the front and rear. And honestly, some people might say, oh, well, why don't you just put the blue dice in the side arcs? You can't, because this is a Rebel ship. Rebels can run Akbar as their commander. Akbar is your commander. Well, imagine running 15 GR75 combat retrofits. Yeah, that gets out of hand really quickly, because you're throwing 2 red and a blue dice out of the side arcs of 15 of these things, and then maybe, I haven't looked at the points really, but say you put Admiral Akbar on Pelta and just fly him away from the battle. Yeah. Now, you really can't add more dice to the side arcs. Way to balance it? Maybe put it at 20. Maybe. Occasionally you might find a situation where, okay, yeah, I can justify paying an extra 2 points to throw some extra blue dice at stuff in my list. But honestly, this is a really hard ship to salvage. I'm glad it's here. And, occasionally you can run it and it can be neat. But again, it really needs to come down in points. It does have a pretty cool looking spot gloss card, though. I will give it that. That is a really cool bit of artwork. Moving on, we have the Imperial 1 Star Destroyer. Yeah, honestly, I was considering just not including this ship in my video here, just because, well, it's not bad, but I decided to include it because what it is heavily power crept. So, the Imperial 2 Star Destroyer is, of course, the first comparison, and really the Imperial 2 is 10 points more for more longer range arcs, and it replaces one of its offensive retrofit slots with a defensive one. Okay, so Imperial 2 is more survivable, and it can keep enemies at range more effectively. But really, what does the Imperial 1 do that the Imperial 2 or other Star Destroyers can't? Well, first off, you immediately might think, Squadron Pusher. Obviously, it's got 2 offensive retrofit slots. You can put Expanded Hangar Bay and Boosted Comms in there. Boom, you're activating 5 squadrons. Okay, very, very possible. Quasar 1 does that. It's cheaper, and then you can run it alongside like an Imperial 2 or an Onager. Okay, so not the best Squadron Pusher. What about Close Range Brawler? It's got some black dice. It's got a lot of close black dice and some blue dice. It's got an ion cannon upgrade slot for leading shots. You can put XI7s on there. You can run this as Boarding Troopers Avenger. The Kuat does that better. Now, granted, the Kuat only has a squadron value of 2, so Boarding Troopers is slightly less effective, but it's got a defensive retrofit slot to make it a lot more survivable, and it's got an ordnance upgrade slot. So honestly, while this is a good ship, it's just been power crept. It's suboptimal. And is there a way to fix it? Sure, just bring it down in some more points. And then it's just a really, really cheap Star Destroyer to run. And yeah, that's absolutely worth running. Is a cheap Star Destroyer is always good. Of course, if we're looking at alternate art cards, this ship wins again, just like the Assault Frigate Mark II-A, because that just looks awesome. So incredibly epic. And really just one question, am I nuts, or is that an Imperial 2 Star Destroyer bridge up there? I think that's an ISD 2 bridge. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. Either way, though, that looks awesome. And finally, we have the Interdictor Combat Refit. Now, I'm just going to be honest, I feel this is the least optimal ship to ever include in any Star Wars Armada list. It's just inferior to the Suppression Refit in pretty much every way except the flak dice department. It's got a blue and black flak dice, which obviously better than just one blue. But you notice it only has 1 experimental retrofit slot to the Suppression Refit's 2 experimental retrofit slots. And the Combat Refit doesn't replace that experimental retrofit slot with anything. It's just gone. If it had replaced it with a turbo laser slot, I might be able to understand that. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it. I don't think it would be better, but it's a possibility. But no. So obviously that's a huge downside, but what's more, you may be thinking, well, how is it a downgrade if you're getting more red dice? More red dice are generally a good thing, as you're able to engage the enemy at a longer range. This is true, but I would say this is the one ship in Armada currently where having more red dice is actually a downgrade. It is a downgrade to turn your blue dice into red dice. How does that work? Well, I mentioned briefly in my MC80 Liberty video that the Interdictor is more of a support ship. It is not meant to be the main ship that actually kills the enemy ships. It's the one that's there to ensure that friendly squadrons, bombers, or friendly other Star Destroyers or Onagers can get easy kills on enemy ships. How does it do that? Well, it uses its 3 blue dice in each arc, plus its disposable capacitors, plus some sort of ion cannon upgrade. I like using either HIEs, overload pulse, or ion cannon batteries. But then you use those, and then you just strip shields from your opponent's ships, and Bob's your uncle. It's really quite simple, and it's much more tricky now that the combat refit loses a blue dice and replaces it with a red dice. So, looking at this, it really is a tough ship to balance, because blue dice tend to have more utility, more support potential when it comes to their upgrades than red dice. But how would we balance it? Well, I would say keep the point cost the same, give it an experimental retrofit slot, so it is 2 experimental slots, like the suppression refit, and replace the ion cannon upgrade with a turbo laser one. Is that better than the suppression refit? Probably not, but at least then it's a little more in flavor, given that it has turbo laser retrofits instead of ion cannon ones, and it's also at least not a downgrade overall. So, that about wraps it up. Just let me know what you think. Did you agree with this? Should the ISD-1 be on this list at all? Do you completely hate everything about this? Is it too much clickbait, making it look like a top 10 list? Let me know down in the comments below. But that's all for today, and I'll see you guys next time.